Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I stood in my custom-built farmhouse kitchen wedding invitation trembling in my hand. The ivory card read, "Collins and Sarah's wedding in elegant gold script," but what mattered most was what it didn't say. No reserved seating for Margaret and Robert Thompson, my parents. 6 years ago, they dumped me at my grandfather's failing wheat farm so my sister Emma could shine at Stanford without any distractions. They called me average, claimed I was holding the family back from greatness. Now they desperately needed my support after losing everything, begging for forgiveness and demanding I remember family loyalty. But as I sealed that invitation, I realized they'd never imagined their discarded son would build an agricultural empire worth millions. The memory of that devastating August evening still burned in my chest like acid. I was 18, fresh out of Lakewood High School in suburban Denver, clutching my acceptance letter to Colorado State University's engineering program. My parents, Margaret and Robert Thompson, ran a successful real estate agency specializing in luxury mountain properties. Their pride and joy wasn't me, though. It was my 16-year-old sister, Emma, who had just received early admission to Stanford University. Emma was everything I apparently wasn't. Where I earned solid B's through determination and late-night studying, she effortlessly pulled straight A's while juggling debate team, student government, and volunteer work at the Children's Hospital. Our dinner conversations revolved around her achievements like planets orbiting the sun. Mom would beam while discussing Emma's latest academic trophy, while Dad calculated the investment returns on her future law degree. "Emma's going to change the world," Mom declared one evening, cutting into her herb-crusted salmon. "Stanford's pre-law program only accepts the most exceptional students. This is our family's ticket to real success." I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, wondering when my own college acceptance had become invisible. Dad's phone buzzed with another client call about million-dollar mountain estates, while Emma described her internship plans with a federal judge's office. "What about Collins's engineering program?" Emma asked, surprising me with genuine interest. "Colorado State has an excellent reputation." Mom's fork paused midway to her mouth. "Engineering is practical, of course. But Emma's opportunities are once in a lifetime. We need to focus our resources where they'll make the biggest impact." That phrase, "focus our resources," became the family motto over the following weeks. Late-night conversations between my parents leaked through thin walls. They spoke about Emma's potential in hushed, reverent tones while discussing my future like a financial burden requiring careful management. "Collins will figure things out," Dad's voice carried from their bedroom. "He's resourceful, but Emma needs everything we can give her right now. This Stanford opportunity could set up our entire family for generations." The plan revealed itself gradually, like storm clouds gathering on a clear horizon. First, they mentioned my grandfather Frank's wheat farm in Nebraska was struggling since my grandmother's death. Then they suggested I might benefit from learning real work ethic before starting college. Finally, one scorching July afternoon, they presented their decision as fait accompli. "We think a gap year would be perfect for you," Mom announced, her real estate smile firmly in place. "Grandfather Frank needs help with the farm, and you could learn valuable life skills while Emma gets settled at Stanford." "But I'm supposed to start engineering classes in 6 weeks." I protested, my acceptance letter crumpling in my sweating palm. "I've already registered for courses." Dad adjusted his tie, the same gesture he used when delivering bad news to clients. "Son, sometimes we need to make sacrifices for family. Emma's education is an investment in all our futures. You'll still go to college eventually, just not right now." Emma looked stricken, her usual confidence replaced by uncomfortable silence. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "Collins shouldn't have to give up college because of me." "Nobody's giving up anything," Mom snapped, her patience thinning. "We're making strategic decisions. Collins will thank us later when Emma's law career benefits the whole family." The car ride to Nebraska stretched like a funeral procession. My belongings filled 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box, everything else deemed unnecessary for farm life. Dad drove while Mom maintained cheerful chatter about the adventure I was about to embark on. Emma sat beside me in the back seat, tears streaming down her cheeks despite my parents' orders to stay positive. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered, when our parents couldn't hear. "Once I get to Stanford, I'll find a way to help with tuition costs. You shouldn't suffer because of my dreams." Grandfather Frank's property appeared after 5 hours of cornfields and highway monotony, 800 acres of struggling wheat surrounding a weathered farmhouse that needed paint and prayer in equal measure. Frank himself stood on the sagging front porch, his weathered face displaying confusion rather than welcome. "I thought this was a summer visit," he said, his gravelly voice carrying suspicion. "Nobody mentioned permanent arrangements." Dad's explanation came in rapid-fire business speak about mutual benefits and character building. Mom added enthusiastic commentary about Colin's learning responsibility while helping family in need. Frank listened with growing anger, his arthritic hands clenching into fists. "You're dumping your son on me because it's convenient," Frank finally interrupted. "Don't dress it up with fancy talk about life lessons." The argument that followed shattered any remaining illusions about temporary arrangements. My parents had already sold my car, a graduation gift they now claimed was needed for Emma's transportation at Stanford. They'd canceled my dorm reservation and withdrew my enrollment deposit using the money for Emma's textbook fund. "Collins will thank us when he's older," Mom insisted, her real estate training keeping her voice steady despite Frank's fury. Sometimes parents have to make hard choices. They left before sunset, their luxury sedan, disappearing into wheat fields like a mirage. Emma's face pressed against the rear window, her mouth forming apologies I couldn't hear over gravel crunching under expensive tires. Frank and I stood alone in the gathering darkness, strangers united only by abandonment. He cleared his throat roughly, then headed toward the house without invitation or explanation. I followed with my meager possessions, understanding that my childhood had officially ended on a Nebraska dirt road. That first night in the spare bedroom surrounded by cardboard boxes and moth-eaten quilts, I tried calling home. Mom's voice was brisk and efficient, already focused on Emma's orientation schedule. When I mentioned feeling abandoned, she sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. "We're not abandoning you, Collins. We're giving you opportunities to grow up and contribute. Call us next month when you've had time to adjust." The line went dead before I could respond. 3 weeks later, when I tried calling for my 19th birthday, the number was disconnected. They'd changed it without warning, cutting their final tie to the son who no longer served their plans. The first year on Frank's farm nearly destroyed me completely. Grandfather Frank was drowning in grief and whiskey, mourning my grandmother Dorothy, while watching his life's work crumble around him. She'd been the farm's bookkeeper, meal planner, and emotional anchor. Without her, gentle organization bills piled up like autumn leaves while equipment broke down and crops withered under mismanagement. Frank's mornings began with black coffee spiked with bourbon, his arthritis-gnarled hands shaking as he stared at ledgers full of red numbers. He'd lost 60 pounds since Dorothy's funeral, his flannel shirts hanging loose on a frame that had once been powerful enough to wrestle tractors and stubborn cattle. "Should have sold this place years ago," he'd mutter, squinting at overdue notices from the bank. "Dorothy always said I was too stubborn for my own good. I knew nothing about farming beyond what I'd seen in movies. My first attempt at feeding chickens resulted in scattered grain and angry birds pecking my ankles bloody. Operating the ancient tractor nearly ended with me upside down in an irrigation ditch, saved only by Frank's surprisingly quick reflexes despite his alcohol consumption. "City boy's gonna kill himself before harvest," he grumbled, teaching me clutch control for the 3rd time. "Your parents really thought dumping you here would solve their problems?" Local kids my age found my situation hilarious. Jason Martinez, whose family ran the successful ranch next door, loved telling everyone about the real estate prince whose parents threw him away. Sarah Thompson, no relation despite sharing my family's name, worked for the county agricultural extension office and tried being diplomatic about my obvious incompetence. "Farming's not intuitive," she explained after watching me plant seed rows so crooked they looked like drunken snakes. "Most people need years to understand the basics." Her kindness felt like mockery when everything I touched turned to disaster. The irrigation system flooded half the wheat field because I misread pressure gauges. I accidentally poisoned prize-winning tomatoes with the wrong fertilizer mixture. Even simple tasks like collecting eggs became adventures in destruction as I tripped over chickens and broke shells with clumsy enthusiasm. Frank's drinking increased proportionally to my failures. He'd disappear into Dorothy's sewing room with a whiskey bottle talking to her photograph about worthless grandsons and broken dreams. Sometimes I'd hear him sobbing through thin walls, grieving not just his wife, but everything they'd built together. 60 years we worked this land, he'd slur during his darker moments. Now it's dying with me, and I'm stuck with a kid who can't tell wheat from weeds. The isolation was crushing. No internet, unreliable phone service, and miles of empty farmland, stretching toward horizons that felt like prison walls. I'd dream about Colorado State's engineering labs, about the life I was supposed to be living while Emma flourished at Stanford. Instead, I mucked out pig stalls and pretended to understand why corn grew in neat rows, while grief slowly consumed my grandfather's will to live. Everything changed one November evening when I found Frank passed out in Dorothy's room, surrounded by scattered photographs and military medals I'd never seen before. Bronze stars, purple hearts, and commendation letters told stories about a man I didn't recognize. Technical drawings covered the floor, detailed schematics for aircraft engines and agricultural machinery that looked more like engineering marvels than farm equipment. When Frank sobered up enough to notice me studying his hidden treasures, shame flickered across his weathered features. He'd kept his past locked away like classified secrets, pretending to be just another failing farmer, instead of the aerospace engineer who designed fighter planes during the Korean War. "Your grandmother made me promise to leave the war behind." He explained, his voice steadier than I'd heard in months. "She wanted me to find peace in simple things, growing food instead of building weapons." The technical drawings revealed sophisticated innovations in crop management, water conservation, and soil enhancement. Frank had spent decades developing revolutionary farming techniques, but grief and alcohol had buried his brilliance under layers of self-pity and despair. "Why aren't you using these ideas?" I asked, studying blueprints for automated irrigation systems decades ahead of anything I'd seen. Frank's laugh came bitter and harsh. "What's the point? Dorothy's gone, the bank's circling like vultures, and I'm too old to start over. These are just forgotten dreams from a forgotten man." But studying those plans awakened something in both of us. Frank's engineering mind began engaging with problems he'd ignored for months, while I finally found purpose beyond just surviving, until my parents decided to reclaim me. We stayed up until dawn, discussing crop rotation theories and sustainable agriculture principles, our conversation flowing like it hadn't since Dorothy's funeral. "You've got your father's brain for systems thinking," Frank admitted as sunrise painted wheat fields gold. "Maybe we can save this place after all?" The revelation about Frank's land ownership came during a particularly brutal January blizzard. While organizing financial documents for tax preparation, I discovered deed after deed showing Frank's acquisitions over 40 years. He owned nearly 2,000 acres surrounding the original farm, purchased quietly, using military pension and Dorothy's inheritance from her father's successful grain elevator business. "I've been buying up neighbors' land whenever they needed to sell." Frank confessed, his eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "Dorothy and I plan to create something special, a model farm demonstrating sustainable agriculture. Then cancer took her before we could make it happen. The scope of Frank's vision was breathtaking. He'd mapped out integrated systems for crop rotation, livestock management, and renewable energy production that could transform traditional farming into environmental stewardship. His engineering background had produced innovations worth millions in patent potential, all gathering dust while he drank himself toward Dorothy's grave. "I've been waiting for someone worthy to inherit this dream," Frank said quietly. "Your parents thought they were dumping you here, but maybe they accidentally gave you the future you were meant to have." Frank's transformation from grieving drunk to demanding mentor began with military precision, the morning after our revelation. He dumped his whiskey down the kitchen sink, replaced beer in the refrigerator with technical manuals, and announced that my real education would begin immediately. "Farming's not just about growing crops," he declared, spreading blueprints across the newly cleared kitchen table. "It's agricultural engineering, business management, soil chemistry, and environmental science rolled into one. You're going to learn all of it." My days became 18-hour marathons combining physical labor with intensive study. Frank taught me soil composition analysis using chemistry sets he'd ordered from agricultural supply companies. I learned to read weather patterns like technical specifications, understanding how atmospheric pressure affected crop growth and irrigation timing. Modern farmers who survive are really agricultural engineers. Frank explained, showing me computerized systems for monitoring soil moisture and nutrient levels. "Your generation needs to think in systems, not just seasons." While I worked outside managing crops and livestock, Frank researched agricultural technology developments and online educational programs. He enrolled me in distance learning courses through Nebraska Agricultural College, supplementing my hands-on training with formal academic credentials. The physical transformation was dramatic. Months of manual labor had built muscle where soft suburban living had left weakness. My hands, once smooth from video games and textbooks, became calloused from machinery operation and animal care. But more importantly, my confidence grew as complex agricultural systems began making intuitive sense. Frank's innovative irrigation techniques produced remarkable results during our first full growing season. Traditional farmers in our area averaged 20 bushels per acre of wheat, but our precision watering and soil enhancement methods yielded 38 bushels per acre. Word spread quickly through farming communities about the dramatic improvements at Frank's property. Sarah Thompson, the agricultural extension agent, became a regular visitor as Frank demonstrated his water conservation innovations. Her professional interest gradually shifted toward personal attention as I proved capable of intelligent conversation about sustainable farming practices rather than just fumbling with basic equipment. "You've changed completely from last year," she observed, watching me calibrate fertilizer distribution systems with practiced efficiency. "Frank's teaching you things they don't cover in agricultural school." Sarah was 26, with practical blonde hair always pulled back in efficient ponytails and green eyes that sparkled when discussing environmental conservation. She drove a county-issued pickup truck filled with soil testing equipment and spoke passionately about helping small farms survive corporate agriculture's expansion. Our relationship developed slowly through shared work on Frank's innovative projects. She helped document his techniques for publication in agricultural journals, while I provided practical demonstrations of how theories worked in real-world applications. Late evenings found us reviewing crop data and discussing sustainable farming's future over Frank's surprisingly excellent homemade chili. "You're not like other farmers I work with," Sarah admitted one evening as we reviewed soil analysis reports. "Most men your age around here think environmental conservation means liberal propaganda. You understand it's about long-term profitability." Frank's health scare came during spring planting season when chest pains sent him to the county hospital for 3 days. Doctors diagnosed stress-related heart palpitations but warned that his 78-year-old body couldn't handle the physical demands of farm management much longer. "I need to accelerate your learning timeline," Frank announced upon returning home with nitroglycerin tablets and strict orders to reduce workload. "There's too much I haven't taught you yet." That crisis motivated our most ambitious project yet, documenting Frank's innovative techniques into comprehensive manuals that could be published and patented. We spent long evenings writing detailed explanations of water conservation methods, soil enhancement processes, and integrated pest management systems that Frank had developed over decades of experimentation. The breakthrough came when agricultural engineering professors from University of Nebraska visited our farm after reading preliminary reports about our yield improvements. Dr. Patricia Williams, Department Head of Sustainable Agriculture, spent 3 days studying Frank's methods with growing excitement. These innovations could revolutionize small farm profitability. She declared, photographing our equipment modifications and irrigation systems. Have you considered patent applications for these techniques? Frank and I exchanged meaningful glances across rows of thriving wheat that stood proof of our collaboration's success. The professors weren't just impressed by our crop yields. They recognized the commercial potential of Frank's engineering innovations combined with my systematic documentation of practical applications. We've been working towards something bigger than just saving one farm, Frank admitted to Dr. Williams. Collins here has helped me realize these techniques could help struggling farmers across the Midwest survive economic pressures. The patent research revealed we'd unknowingly developed 3 revolutionary processes with significant commercial value. Our water conservation system could reduce irrigation costs by 40% while increasing crop yields. The soil enhancement technique eliminated need for expensive chemical fertilizers by creating sustainable nutrient cycles. Most valuable was our integrated pest management approach that used beneficial insects and companion planting to eliminate pesticide requirements entirely. Conservative estimates suggest licensing potential in the millions of dollars annually. Dr. Williams explained, reviewing our documentation with patent attorney colleagues. Agricultural corporations would pay substantial fees to implement these methods on large-scale operations. Frank's satisfaction was evident as we reviewed preliminary patent applications that listed both our names as co-inventors. His grief over Dorothy's death had transformed into pride about creating something meaningful from their shared vision of sustainable agriculture. Your parents thought they were throwing you away, Frank observed, watching me demonstrate soil testing procedures to visiting agricultural students. Instead, they gave you exactly what you needed to become someone they never imagined possible. By my 21st birthday, Frank and I had transformed 800 acres of struggling farmland into a showcase of agricultural innovation that drew visitors from across the Midwest. Our patent applications had been approved, generating licensing inquiries from major agricultural corporations seeking to implement our techniques on industrial scales. The first substantial licensing deal came from Heartland Agricultural Solutions, a company managing over 50,000 acres of corn and wheat production across Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. They offered $200,000 annually for exclusive Midwest licensing rights to our water conservation and soil enhancement systems. This is more money than most small farms see in 5 years. Frank marveled, reviewing contract terms with lawyers from Lincoln. Your documentation and presentation skills made this possible, Collins. I never could have explained these ideas to corporate executives. Sarah had become my closest advisor as our agricultural consulting business Prairie Innovations expanded beyond licensing into direct consulting services. Her background in agricultural extension work provided credibility with traditional farmers, suspicious of innovations, while my technical knowledge and Frank's engineering expertise offered practical solutions to problems they'd struggled with for generations. Farmers trust results more than theories, Sarah explained as we prepared for a presentation to the Nebraska Farmers Cooperative. Show them yield improvements and cost reductions, and they'll listen to anything you suggest. Our consulting clients range from family operations struggling with debt to corporate farms seeking competitive advantages. The Martinez Ranch next door became our first local success story after implementing our integrated pest management system, reducing pesticide costs by 60% while increasing crop quality enough to command premium prices. Jason's father went from mocking me to calling me for advice. I told Frank reviewing quarterly reports showing Prairie Innovations had earned over $80,000 in consulting fees during our first 6 months of operation. Success changes how people see you pretty quickly. Frank's pride was evident as agricultural journals published articles about our techniques, and universities invited us to speak at farming conferences. His engineering background gave him credibility with academic audiences, while my practical experience resonated with working farmers facing real economic pressures. The speaking circuit became surprisingly lucrative. Conference organizers paid substantial fees for presentations about sustainable agriculture techniques that produced measurable results. Agricultural equipment manufacturers sponsored our demonstrations, eager to associate their products with our success stories. "You've got a natural gift for explaining complex ideas in simple terms," Sarah observed after watching me present to a conference of over 300 farmers in Des Moines. "Most engineers talk over people's heads, but you make advanced techniques feel accessible." Our relationship had deepened through shared work and mutual respect for each other's expertise. Sarah's environmental science background complemented my engineering approach, while her connections throughout agricultural extension services opened doors that might otherwise remain closed to newcomers. Property acquisition became our next focus as neighboring farmers faced foreclosure pressures. Frank's accumulated land purchases over decades had created opportunities to help struggling families while expanding our demonstration acreage for innovative techniques. The Peterson family farm represented our most significant acquisition, 400 acres of premium soil that connected our existing property with the county highway system. Bill Peterson, facing bankruptcy after 3 consecutive crop failures, offered to sell for less than market value rather than lose everything to bank foreclosure. "Your grandfather's helping us keep some dignity." Peterson's wife Mary told me, tears streaming as she signed sales documents. He could have waited for the sheriff's auction and paid half this amount. Frank's generosity wasn't purely altruistic. The Peterson land included valuable water rights and highway access that enhanced our property's commercial potential. More importantly, it provided additional acreage for demonstrating our techniques to potential consulting clients and licensing partners. Equipment upgrades reflected our growing success and need to manage larger operations efficiently. Frank invested licensing revenues in state-of-the-art machinery that automated many labor-intensive processes while generating data about soil conditions, crop health, and environmental factors affecting productivity. "Technology serves farmers best when it simplifies decision-making," Frank explained, showing me computerized monitoring systems that tracked dozens of variables affecting crop performance. "Your generation understands data analysis better than mine, so you'll take these tools further than I ever could." The agricultural community's transformation from skepticism to respect was gradual but unmistakable. Farmers who'd initially dismissed Frank's innovations as impractical began requesting consultations after seeing our consistently superior yields and profitability. County Agricultural Extension Services invited us to lead workshops for struggling farmers, while state government officials toured our facilities as examples of successful rural economic development. Media attention brought visitors from other states interested in implementing our techniques in different climate and soil conditions. "We're not just running a successful farm anymore," Sarah pointed out, reviewing our appointment calendar filled with consulting meetings and demonstration requests. "You're building an agricultural education and innovation center." The unexpected phone call from Emma came on a Thursday evening in October, while Sarah and I reviewed expansion plans for the following year. I hadn't heard my sister's voice in over 3 years since she'd stopped calling after starting Stanford's demanding course load. Her voice shook with tears and desperation as she explained our parents' financial collapse. The Denver real estate market had crashed harder than anyone anticipated, leaving Margaret and Robert buried under debt they'd accumulated to maintain appearances while supporting Emma's expensive education. They borrowed against everything for my tuition and living expenses. Emma confessed, her words tumbling over each other in panic. The business is bankrupt. They're losing the house. And they've been lying about it for months. Collins, I'm sorry about what they did to you, but they need help and I don't know where else to turn. The irony was almost funny if it weren't so painful. Parents who'd abandoned me to focus resources on Emma's success now desperately needed support from the son they'd discarded like outdated furniture. Their golden daughter's achievements had cost them everything, while their forgotten son had built exactly the kind of success they'd always claimed to value. What exactly do they expect from me? I asked, my voice carefully neutral, despite emotional turmoil churning in my chest. Emma's silence stretched long enough for me to hear her struggling with truths she probably hadn't fully acknowledged herself. They want you to help financially. Mom thinks you owe them because they're family, and Dad believes your success proves their decision to send you to Frank was right all along. Emma's revelation about our parents' financial ruin opened floodgates of information that had been carefully hidden behind social media facades and holiday newsletters. Margaret and Robert Thompson's real estate empire hadn't just declined. It had collapsed spectacularly under the weight of over-leveraged properties and Emma's Stanford expenses. They refinanced the house 3 times to cover my tuition. Emma explained during our second phone conversation, her voice hollow with guilt and exhaustion. Dad kept saying Stanford was an investment that would pay off when I graduated from law school. But they never had realistic plans for managing the debt. The details emerged like evidence in a fraud investigation. Mom had borrowed against her real estate license to fund Emma's sorority fees and study abroad programs. Dad had co-signed student loans that consumed 60% of their monthly income, while their client base evaporated during the economic downturn. Most painfully, they'd been monitoring my success through agricultural news websites and social media posts from farming conferences. Frank's interviews about our innovative techniques had mentioned me by name, and patent filings listing my address had made our financial success impossible to hide. They've been showing off articles about your achievements to their friends. Emma admitted shame, evident in every word. Mom tells everyone how proud she is that her son is revolutionizing agriculture, like sending you to Frank's farm was some brilliant parenting strategy instead of abandonment. The rewriting of history was breathtaking in its audacity. According to Margaret and Robert's current narrative, they'd recognized my potential for agricultural innovation and wisely arranged mentorship with Frank to develop my talents. My success proved their parenting wisdom, while Emma's struggles at Stanford were temporary setbacks in an otherwise brilliant plan. Dad actually told Uncle Mike that you inherited your engineering abilities from him. Emma said, her voice cracking with disbelief. He's claiming credit for everything you've accomplished while pretending he didn't sell your car and cancel your college enrollment without discussion. Frank's reaction to the news was pure fury, mixed with protective instincts I'd never seen before. When I explained my parents' financial demands and their revisionist history about my abandonment, his weathered face darkened with rage that made his Korean War veteran's temperament unmistakable. They threw you away like garbage when you inconvenienced them, he growled, pacing our kitchen with military precision despite his arthritis. Now they want to claim credit for your success and demand financial support for their failures. That takes nerve I can't even comprehend. Sarah's response was more analytical, but equally supportive. Her work with agricultural extension services had shown her plenty of family conflicts over farm inheritance and financial obligations, giving her perspective on manipulation tactics used by desperate relatives. They're using classic emotional blackmail, she observed, reviewing printed emails Emma had forwarded, showing our parents' increasingly frantic attempts to contact me. They'll escalate from guilt to anger to threats as their situation becomes more desperate. The first direct contact came through a Facebook message from Margaret written in the cheerful tone she'd perfected for real estate sales. She acted as though 3 years of silence was a minor communication gap rather than deliberate abandonment, diving immediately into enthusiastic praise for my agricultural achievements. Collins, sweetheart, your father and I are so incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished with Frank. We always knew you had special talents that would flourish with the right opportunities, and seeing your success in agricultural innovation makes our hearts burst with joy. The message continued for several paragraphs, praising my engineering skills and business acumen, while carefully avoiding any mention of how I'd ended up on Frank's farm or why they'd cut contact for 3 years. Instead, she positioned herself and Robert as proud parents whose wisdom in encouraging my agricultural education was now being vindicated. We're going through some temporary financial challenges with the real estate market, Margaret's message concluded, and we hope you might consider helping family during this difficult time. After all the sacrifices we made for your and Emma's education, we know you'll want to support us, as we've always supported you. Frank read the message with increasing disgust, pointing out every manipulation technique with military tactical analysis. Notice how she avoids acknowledging they abandoned you, reframes their rejection as educational planning, and immediately moves to financial demands disguised as family obligation. Robert's phone call came 2 days later, his approach more direct but equally manipulative. His voice carried the confident authority he'd used in real estate negotiations, as though financial success gave him the right to make demands without acknowledgement of past behavior. "Oh, son, I'm glad we can finally talk about your impressive achievements." He began, completely ignoring 3 years of refused contact. "Your mother and I always believed you had entrepreneur potential, and Frank's mentorship has clearly brought out your best qualities." When I remained silent, Robert shifted into sales mode, presenting our parents' crisis as a temporary setback requiring family solidarity. He spoke about shared responsibility and mutual support as though these concepts hadn't been completely absent when they'd abandoned me at 18. Successful families help each other through difficult periods. Robert declared, his tone suggesting this was an obvious truth rather than bitter irony. "We invested everything in you and Emma's futures, and now that you're established, we need you to help us through this challenging time." The demands escalated quickly once they realized subtle manipulation wasn't working. Margaret called Frank's house, directly bypassing my cell phone, to deliver increasingly frantic messages about family loyalty and moral obligations. Her real estate polish cracked under financial pressure, revealing desperation that was both pathetic and infuriating. "Collins needs to remember who raised him and gave him the values that led to his success," she told Frank during one particularly unhinged voicemail. "We're his parents, and children have responsibilities to help their families during times of need." Frank's response was swift and decisive. He changed our home phone number and advised me to block my parents' cell phones and email addresses. More importantly, he began documenting their harassment attempts for potential legal action if their behavior escalated further. "They abandoned their parental rights when they threw you away," Frank stated firmly, reviewing threatening messages Robert had sent through Emma's email account. "They don't get to reclaim those rights now that abandoning you has become inconvenient." The most painful revelation came when Emma confessed that our parents had been manipulating extended family relationships by spreading lies about my departure from Denver. According to their version of events, I'd chosen to leave home, despite their objections, abandoning family responsibilities to pursue selfish dreams in Nebraska. "Aunt Linda thinks you ran away from home because you couldn't handle Emma's success," Emma admitted during a tearful phone call. "Mom told everyone you were jealous of my Stanford acceptance and wanted to prove yourself by leaving family behind." Uncle Mike, Dad's brother, who managed a successful construction company in Colorado Springs, had been particularly influenced by these lies. He'd stopped including me in family gatherings and holiday communications, believing I'd selfishly abandoned parents who'd sacrificed everything for their children's education. "They've poisoned every family relationship you had," Emma said, her voice heavy with guilt about her inadvertent role in this manipulation. Everyone thinks you're the ungrateful son who disappeared when family needed you most. The situation reached crisis proportions when Margaret and Robert announced through Emma that they were driving to Nebraska to discuss our family situation in person. They'd already told extended family that Collins had agreed to provide ongoing financial support, making this visit a formality to arrange payment details rather than a negotiation. They're planning to move in with Frank temporarily while they get back on their feet, Emma warned, panic evident in her voice. Mom's already told people they'll be helping you manage the farm expansion while rebuilding their real estate business in rural Nebraska. The morning Margaret and Robert Thompson arrived at Frank's farm, I was operating our newest piece of equipment, a computerized soil analysis system worth more than their house had been before foreclosure. Sarah stood beside me, clipboard in hand, documenting mineral content readings that would guide our spring fertilization strategy. Their luxury sedan looked absurdly out of place among tractors and grain storage facilities, its pristine paint job contrasting sharply with the honest dirt that coated everything on a working farm. They emerged wearing clothes more appropriate for real estate showings than agricultural visits, Dad in pressed khakis and polo shirt, Mom in designer jeans and spotless white sneakers. Collins, Margaret called her realtor smile blazing despite 3 years of silence. Look how wonderful you look. All that outdoor work has made you so strong and healthy. She approached with arms extended for a hug, apparently expecting me to abandon years of hurt and anger for her theatrical display of maternal affection. When I stepped back instead of embracing her confusion, flickered across features accustomed to charm, working on command. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished here, Robert declared, gesturing toward our farm buildings with the same enthusiasm he'd once reserved for million-dollar mountain properties. Frank's done an excellent job mentoring you, and we're excited to be part of this family operation going forward. Frank emerged from the equipment barn, his weathered face displaying the same expression I'd seen when discussing North Korean artillery positions decades earlier. At 78, he still commanded respect through pure force of personality and zero tolerance for manipulation. You're not welcome here, Frank stated, simply positioning himself between my parents and the farmhouse. You abandoned this boy when it was convenient and now want to claim him back when it's profitable. That's not how family works. Margaret's real estate training kicked in as she attempted to manage this unexpected resistance. Frank, I understand you might have gotten the wrong impression about our family situation. Sometimes teenagers exaggerate conflicts to avoid responsibility. I watched your son cry himself to sleep for months after you dumped him here. Frank replied, his voice carrying military authority that made Margaret step backward involuntarily. I watched him work 18-hour days, trying to prove he was worth something after you convinced him he wasn't. Don't you dare suggest he exaggerated anything. Robert tried a different approach, appealing to practical business considerations rather than emotional manipulation. He'd clearly researched our agricultural success and patent licensing income, presenting himself as someone with valuable experience, managing significant financial operations. We're not asking for charity, Robert declared, pulling folded documents from his pocket. We're proposing a partnership arrangement where our business expertise helps expand prairie innovations into real estate and development opportunities. The documents outlined plans for transforming our agricultural consulting success into rural property development ventures. Robert envisioned subdividing failing farms into hobby acreages for wealthy Denver residents seeking country lifestyle investments, using our reputation for agricultural innovation as marketing leverage. You'd be the technical expert while we handle sales and marketing. Robert explained his confidence building as he detailed profit projections and market opportunities. Our combined talents could create wealth beyond anything achievable through farming alone. I studied the papers he'd prepared, recognizing the same manipulative optimism that had convinced them to mortgage everything for Emma's Stanford dreams. Their schemes always sounded logical until reality revealed fundamental flaws in their planning and character. You want to turn sustainable farmland into golf course communities for rich people? I observed setting their proposal aside without serious consideration. That's exactly the kind of development destroying agricultural communities across the Midwest. Margaret's composure cracked as her desperate situation overwhelmed her ability to maintain pleasant facades. Collins, we're your parents. We gave you life, raised you, and sacrificed everything for your future. You can't just turn your back on family because you're angry about temporary decisions we made under difficult circumstances. Temporary. Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice carrying professional authority from years of working with struggling farm families. You sold his car, canceled his college enrollment, and cut contact for 3 years. Those aren't temporary decisions. The confrontation escalated as my parents revealed the true extent of their desperation and entitlement. They'd already told extended family and former clients that Collins had agreed to support them financially, making this visit a formality rather than genuine request for help. Uncle Mike's already loaning us money based on your promise to repay him. Robert admitted his businessman's mask slipping to reveal panic underneath. We've committed to arrangements that require your cooperation, so refusing isn't really an option anymore. Frank's military training became evident as he analyzed their financial manipulation with strategic precision. You're trying to force his compliance by creating obligations he never agreed to. That's fraud, not family support. Margaret's final desperate gambit involved threatening to contest Frank's will, and property transfers claiming her parental rights had never been legally terminated despite their abandonment. She'd consulted lawyers who suggested Collins might be considered a minor under their legal guardianship when agricultural improvements began. Everything you've built here started when you were 18 and technically still are dependent, Margaret declared, producing legal documents she'd prepared in advance. We never formally relinquished parental authority, which means we have legal claims to your innovations and property acquisitions. Frank's response was swift and decisive. He'd anticipated this possibility and prepared comprehensive documentation proving my adult status and independent contributions to all agricultural innovations. More importantly, he'd consulted attorneys about protecting our patents and property rights from exactly this kind of family manipulation. I've been documenting everything since Collins arrived. Frank announced producing thick folders filled with photographs, financial records, and witness statements. Every improvement, every innovation, every business decision has been recorded with dates and independent verification. The legal threat backfired spectacularly when Frank revealed he'd been preparing to formalize my inheritance of the entire farm operation, regardless of their interference. My parents' attempt to claim ownership of our success only accelerated his plans to ensure their manipulation couldn't succeed. Collins will inherit everything when I die. Frank stated with finality that made Margaret visibly pale. The patents, the land, the equipment, and the business relationships we've built together. Your threats don't change anything except my opinion of your character. As my parents realized their manipulation tactics had failed completely, their desperation transformed into vindictive anger directed at both Frank and me. They accused us of being ungrateful and selfish, conveniently forgetting their own behavior when abandoning me 3 years earlier. You'll regret this when we're dead and gone, Margaret hissed, her realtor polish completely abandoned in favor of raw bitterness. Family is supposed to help each other, and you're choosing strangers over the people who gave you life. Their departure was less dramatic than their arrival, but far more final. Robert's sedan disappeared down our gravel driveway carrying parents who'd burned their last bridge through greed and manipulation, rather than genuine remorse and family love. That evening, Frank suffered chest pains that sent us racing to the county hospital, where doctors diagnosed stress-related heart palpitations triggered by the confrontation with my parents. As he lay in the cardiac unit with monitoring equipment beeping steadily, Frank made decisions about our future that would reshape everything. "I'm changing my will to formalize your inheritance immediately," Frank announced, his voice weak but determined. "Your parents won't get another chance to cause this kind of stress or threaten what we've built together." Sarah and I spent hours that night discussing our relationship's future in the context of increased responsibility and family threats. The woman I'd grown to love through shared work and mutual respect was now considering whether she wanted to marry into a situation involving this level of family dysfunction and business complexity. "Your parents aren't going to give up easily," Sarah observed, holding my hand, as we sat beside Frank's hospital bed. "They'll keep trying to manipulate the situation, especially if they're as desperate as Emma described." Frank's recovery was rapid, but his priorities had shifted permanently. He began formal procedures for transferring farm ownership to my name, while our attorneys prepared comprehensive documentation protecting our intellectual property and business assets from future family interference. "We're not just planning a wedding anymore," I told Sarah as we reviewed legal documents Frank's attorney had prepared. "We're planning a life together that might require defending everything we build from people who should be supporting us instead." Emma's phone call came 3 weeks later with news that surprised nobody who understood Margaret and Robert's character. They'd decided to attend my wedding uninvited, planning to use the public setting to pressure me into reconciliation and financial support through emotional manipulation of extended family members. "They're telling everyone you invited them, but forgot to send formal invitations because of how busy you are with the farm." Emma explained, her voice heavy with exhaustion from being caught between loyalty to me and pressure from our parents. "They've already booked a hotel room and told Uncle Mike they'll be sitting in the front row as proud parents." The legal battle that followed my parents' desperate attempt to claim ownership of Frank's farm improvements lasted 6 months and cost them what little remained of their financial resources. Their attorney, desperate for clients after the real estate market collapse, had encouraged litigation based on questionable theories about parental rights and property law. Frank's documentation proved devastatingly comprehensive when presented in Lincoln County Courthouse. Photographs showed the farm's condition when I arrived versus its transformation under our partnership. Financial records demonstrated my contributions from patent licensing and consulting income. Most importantly, witness testimony from Sarah Dr. Williams and neighboring farmers confirmed my adult status and independent decision-making throughout our agricultural innovations. The defendants abandoned their 18-year-old son without legal proceedings or formal arrangements, Judge Patricia Stevens declared during the final hearing. They cannot now claim parental authority over an adult's business ventures simply because those ventures proved successful. Emma's testimony provided the most damaging evidence against our parents' fabricated narrative. Despite pressure to support their legal claims, she courageously described the truth about my abandonment, their financial manipulation, and their deliberate rewriting of family history to avoid accountability. "Collins never abandoned our family," Emma testified, tears streaming as she looked directly at Margaret and Robert's table. "Our parents abandoned him when supporting his dreams became inconvenient for their plans. He built his success despite their rejection, not because of their support." The judge's ruling was comprehensive and final. My parents had no legal claims to Frank's property, our agricultural innovations, or any financial support from ventures they'd actively opposed. Furthermore, their harassment and manipulation attempts warranted restraining orders protecting Frank and me from future interference. Margaret collapsed sobbing in the courthouse hallway as the full implications of their legal defeat became clear. Not only had they lost their lawsuit, but legal fees had consumed their remaining assets, leaving them completely dependent on Emma's part-time income and extended family charity they'd poisoned through lies about my character. "They gambled everything on forcing you to support them," Emma explained during a private conversation after the hearing. "Now they have nothing left except each other and the consequences of their choices. Frank's satisfaction was evident despite his weakened condition from months of legal stress. "Your parents learned that abandoning family has permanent consequences," he observed, reviewing court documents that officially confirmed my inheritance of his agricultural empire. The wedding planning resumed with renewed focus on celebrating chosen family over blood relationships. Sarah and I decided to honor people who'd supported our growth rather than obligating ourselves to relatives who'd caused nothing but pain and manipulation. Our guest list included agricultural colleagues who'd become genuine friends, neighbors who'd welcomed me, despite my urban background, and Frank's military buddies who'd traveled from across the country to witness his surrogate son's marriage. Notably absent were Margaret and Robert Thompson, whose names appeared nowhere on invitations or seating charts. "This wedding represents the family we've built through love and respect," Sarah said, reviewing our final guest list with satisfaction. "It's going to be perfect because it includes people who actually care about our happiness." Frank's health had stabilized enough for him to walk Sarah down the aisle, an honor that meant more to both of us than traditional father of the bride protocols. His pride was unmistakable as he prepared for his role in our ceremony, the grandfather who'd become the father I'd never truly had. Dorothy would have loved seeing this day. Frank reflected, adjusting his military dress uniform for the first time in decades. She always believed broken families could be healed through genuine love and commitment. The ceremony took place in early October, surrounded by wheat fields that had become symbols of transformation and renewal. Agricultural colleagues filled wooden chairs arranged between rows of crops we'd nurtured through innovative techniques that were changing farming practices across the Midwest. Dr. Williams served as officiant, her words connecting our personal commitment to broader themes about sustainable growth and environmental stewardship. "Collins and Sarah represent the best of agricultural innovation," she declared, combining respect for traditional wisdom with courage to embrace positive change. Emma attended as my only blood relative, her presence representing forgiveness and hope for healing relationships damaged by our parents' selfishness. She transferred to University of Nebraska after Stanford became financially impossible, pursuing agricultural law with plans to support sustainable farming initiatives. "I want to help farmers protect their land from exploitation," Emma explained, describing career goals inspired by watching my success in agricultural innovation. "Maybe I can prevent other families from experiencing what ours went through." Frank's speech during the reception brought tears to eyes accustomed to practical discussions about crop yields and equipment maintenance. He spoke about second chances, chosen families, and the agricultural legacy Sarah and I would continue building together. "Collins came to me as a discarded boy with broken dreams," Frank declared, his voice carrying across assembled friends and colleagues. "He's become the son I never had, and the farmer Dorothy and I always hoped would inherit our vision for sustainable agriculture." The announcement about our scholarship fund came during the reception's final hour, when emotions were highest and our community was most receptive to supporting meaningful initiatives. Frank and I had established the Dorothy Thompson Memorial Fund for abandoned and neglected youth seeking agricultural education opportunities. "We're committing $50,000 annually to support young people whose families can't or won't invest in their dreams," I announced, watching faces light up with approval and excitement. "Every scholarship recipient will intern on our farm, learning practical skills while pursuing formal education." Margaret and Robert Thompson watched our celebration from the county road, their car parked where they could observe but not participate in the life they'd forfeited through selfish choices. Emma had warned me about their presence, but Frank suggested we ignore their desperate attempt to insert themselves into our happiness. "They're learning that some consequences are permanent," Frank observed, watching my parents' car disappear as reception festivities continued around us. "You can't abandon family and expect to reclaim relationships when convenience demands it." Sarah's happiness was radiant as we danced to music played by a bluegrass band composed of local farmers who'd learned instruments during long winter months. Our wedding celebrated not just our marriage, but the agricultural community that had embraced us as family when blood relatives had failed completely. Okay, Nunk, we're going to build something beautiful together, Sarah whispered as we swayed to music under stars that seemed to shine brighter over wheat fields where broken dreams had grown into fulfilling reality. The honeymoon was brief but perfect, a week exploring sustainable agriculture practices in Costa Rica that gave us ideas for expanding our innovations into different climate conditions. We returned energized about possibilities for international consulting and patent licensing that could spread our techniques globally. Frank's final gift was announced during our first Christmas as a married couple, when he formally transferred all property ownership to our names while retaining lifetime residence rights and advisory roles in business operations. His agricultural empire had become our foundation for building whatever future we could imagine. "I'm not dying anytime soon," Frank declared, grinning at our surprised expressions over Christmas dinner. "But I want to see you two take this operation beyond anything Dorothy and I ever dreamed possible." The last contact from Margaret and Robert came through Emma 6 months after our wedding, when desperate circumstances forced them to accept charity from distant relatives in Florida. They'd lost their Denver home, declared bankruptcy, and finally acknowledged that their golden daughter's success hadn't generated the financial returns they'd expected. "They asked me to tell you they're proud of what you've accomplished," Emma reported, though her tone suggested skepticism about their sincerity. "I think they finally understand they destroyed something irreplaceable when they abandoned you." Pride felt less important than peace. As Sarah and I focused on expanding our agricultural innovations and supporting young farmers through scholarship programs, our success had grown beyond personal vindication into meaningful contributions to sustainable agriculture and rural community development. Family isn't about blood relations or obligation. I reflected watching Sarah teach agricultural techniques to scholarship recipients who reminded me of my 18-year-old self arriving at Frank's farm with nothing but broken dreams. It's about people who support your growth and celebrate your success without expecting anything in return except love and respect. The Dorothy Thompson Memorial Fund's first scholarship recipient was James Wilson, a 19-year-old from Ohio, whose parents had kicked him out for refusing to abandon environmental science studies they considered impractical. He arrived at our farm with the same lost expression I'd carried 6 years earlier, carrying everything he owned in 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box. "Welcome to your real family," Frank told James, shaking hands with practiced warmth that had transformed my life completely. "You're going to learn that some of the best things in life come from the worst circumstances if you're willing to work hard and stay committed to your dreams." As I watched James begin his own transformation from abandoned youth to agricultural innovator, I understood that my parents' cruelest decision had accidentally given me exactly what I'd always needed: the opportunity to become someone they never imagined possible, surrounded by people who valued character over convenience and love over manipulation. The wedding invitation that had started this story's final chapter still sat in Frank's desk drawer, preserved as a reminder of justice served through simple truth. Margaret and Robert Thompson had received exactly what they'd given: abandonment without explanation, relationship without respect and consequences that matched their choices perfectly. "Success isn't about proving anything to people who hurt you," Sarah observed, reading agricultural journal articles about our latest innovations, while scholarship recipients worked outside under Frank's patient guidance. "It's about building something meaningful with people who believe in your potential from the beginning." Now, whenever young people contact our scholarship program with stories about family abandonment or dreams that seem impossible, I share the truth that transformed my life. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for everything beautiful that follows if you're willing to work for it and surround yourself with people who understand that real family is built through choice, commitment, and unconditional love. Has your family ever made decisions that felt devastating at the time, but ultimately led to unexpected opportunities? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how difficult experiences shaped your path to success. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more inspiring content about overcoming adversity, and share this with someone who might need encouragement about building their own chosen family. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your current struggles might be preparing you for success beyond anything you can currently imagine.